What happens when Hollywood's most enigmatic actor meets late-night television's sharpest tongue, and a simple interview spirals into a career-defining confrontation that nobody saw coming? Tonight, we're diving into the explosive encounter between Ryan Gosling and Stephen Colbert that left audiences stunned, and one A-list star walking off set in disgust. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling me what you think really went down that night. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every single word of this unbelievable clash. The Late Show's iconic Ed Sullivan Theater buzzed with its usual pre-show energy as Ryan Gosling settled into the guest chair across from Stephen Colbert. What started as promotion for Gosling's latest indie film was about to become the most uncomfortable television moment in recent memory. The cameras rolled, the audience applauded, and Colbert flashed his trademark grin. But something felt different. Tonight, Ryan Gosling, everybody, Colbert announced with theatrical enthusiasm. The man who makes silence look sexy and somehow convinced the world that jazz is cool again. The audience laughed, but Gosling's smile seemed forced, his usual composed demeanor already showing cracks. "Thanks for having me, Stephen," Gosling replied, his voice carrying an edge that veteran talk show watchers might have recognized as trouble brewing. Colbert leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with the predatory instinct that had made him famous. "So, Ryan, I have to ask about your new film. It's described as a deeply personal meditation on masculinity and vulnerability. Sounds like the kind of movie that wins awards but puts audiences to sleep. Tell me I'm wrong." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Gosling's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his response came measured and professional. "Well, Stephen, I think audiences are hungry for authentic stories. Not everything needs explosions and quips to be meaningful." "Authentic stories," Colbert repeated, his tone dripping with mock sincerity. "Right, because nothing says authentic like a millionaire actor pretending to struggle with ordinary problems. I mean, what's next? A movie about the hardships of owning multiple vacation homes?" The audience laughed nervously, sensing the tension building between the two men. Gosling's hands, usually relaxed, had formed subtle fists on his lap. "I think you're missing the point," Gosling said, his voice still controlled but gaining intensity. "The character I play isn't about wealth or status. It's about connection, about what it means to be human in a world that increasingly rewards surface over substance." Colbert's laugh was sharp and cutting. "Oh, please, spare us the film school philosophy. You're an actor, Ryan, not Socrates. You memorize lines and look pretty for cameras. Let's not pretend there's some deeper artistic mission here." The words hit their target. Gosling's composure finally cracked, his eyes flashing with genuine anger. "You know what, Stephen? I came here thinking we'd have a conversation about art, about storytelling, about things that actually matter. Instead, you're treating this like some kind of roast where nothing is sacred." "Things that matter?" Colbert shot back, his voice rising. "You think your little indie movie matters? You think anyone outside of film festivals and coffee shops cares about your character's journey of self-discovery? This is entertainment, not therapy." The audience fell silent now, the usual rhythms of late-night television completely disrupted. Even Colbert's band looked uncomfortable, their instruments suddenly feeling heavy in their hands. Gosling leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You know what's entertaining? Watching someone who built a career on fake sincerity lecture others about authenticity. At least when I'm playing a character, I'm honest about it." The insult landed like a physical blow. Colbert's carefully constructed persona wavered for just a moment, revealing something raw and angry underneath. "Excuse me? You heard me," Gosling continued, his voice gaining strength. "This whole show, this whole character you play, it's just as manufactured as anything Hollywood produces. The difference is, I don't pretend my performances are real." Colbert's face flushed red, his trademark grin replaced by something much more sinister. Let me tell you something, Mr. Method Actor. I've been doing this for decades while you were still trying to wash the Mickey Mouse Club stench off your resume. Don't lecture me about authenticity when your biggest acting challenge is remembering not to blink too much. The gloves were officially off now. Gosling stood slightly in his chair, his body language shifting from defensive to aggressive. At least I'm not hiding behind a desk, throwing stones at people who actually take risks with their work. What's the last thing you created that wasn't just tearing down someone else's effort? I create conversation, Colbert snapped. I create discourse. I hold up a mirror to society's absurdities, including overpaid actors who think they're philosophers. You create nothing, Gosling fired back, his voice now carrying the full weight of his frustration. You're a parasite who feeds off other people's actual work. When's the last time you put yourself on the line for anything other than a punchline? The audience was completely silent now, witnessing something unprecedented in the usually choreographed world of late-night television. Even the cameras seemed to be holding their breath. Colbert's mask had completely slipped, revealing the wounded ego beneath. You want to talk about putting yourself on the line? Try doing live television 5 nights a week. Try facing the public. Without a script, without multiple takes, without the luxury of pretending to be someone else when things get difficult. That's rich, Gosling laughed bitterly, coming from someone who's been playing the same character for so long he's forgotten. Where Stephen Colbert ends and the performance begins. At least my characters have growth arcs. The tension in the Ed Sullivan Theater had reached a breaking point. Colbert's knuckles were white as he gripped his index cards, his usual smooth delivery replaced by barely contained rage. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to laugh, applaud, or simply leave. Growth arcs? Colbert's voice cracked slightly, the polished veneer completely gone now. Let me tell you about growth, Ryan. I've interviewed presidents, Nobel Prize winners, people who've actually changed the world. And here you sit, lecturing me about authenticity because you can brood convincingly on camera. Gosling's eyes narrowed, his Hollywood training warring with his genuine anger. Those interviews you're so proud of, what are they really? Softball. Questions wrapped in false intimacy. You don't challenge power, Stephen. You perform challenge. There's a difference. I perform challenge? Colbert's laugh was harsh and bitter. I've taken on politicians, corporate executives, religious leaders. I've used this platform to expose hypocrisy and corruption, while you've been worried about your hair looking perfect in close-ups. And yet here you are, Gosling said, his voice dropping to a cold whisper, attacking an actor for making a movie about human connection. Real brave, Stephen. Really speaking truth to power there. The words stung because they contained truth. Colbert's face contorted with fury as he realized he'd been outmaneuvered. Don't you dare question my integrity. I've built a career on calling out phonies and pretenders, and that's exactly what you are. Phonies and pretenders? Gosling stood, up now, his tall frame casting a shadow across Colbert's desk. Look in a mirror, Stephen. You've spent so long hiding behind irony and sarcasm that you've forgotten how to have a genuine conversation. When's the last time you showed your audience who you really are, instead of this manufactured personality? Colbert shot to his feet. As well, his chair rolling backward with the force. This is who I really am. This is me calling out your pretentious, self-important, pseudo-intellectual garbage for what it is. You're not an artist, Ryan. You're a product. A product? Gosling's voice rose to match Colbert's intensity. At least I'm trying to create something meaningful. What do you create besides cynicism? What do you add to the world besides negativity? Dressed up as cleverness? I add honesty, Colbert shouted, his composure completely shattered. I strip away the lies and the pretense and show people what's really there. And what's really there with you is an empty, pretty boy who thinks frowning equals depth. The insult hit harder than any physical blow could have. Gosling's face went white with rage, his hands trembling slightly. Empty? You want to talk about empty? Your entire show is empty. Empty jokes about empty politics delivered to an empty audience who laughs because they're told to. Get out, Colbert said suddenly, his voice deadly quiet. Get out of my theater. Your theater? Gosling laughed, but there was no humor in it. This isn't your theater, Stephen. This is just another stage where you perform your little one-man show about being important. But we both know the truth, don't we? I said get out, Colbert repeated, louder now, pointing toward the exit. Security! But Gosling wasn't finished. The truth is you're terrified. Terrified that underneath all the jokes and the fake outrage, there's nothing there. No real opinions, no real convictions, just a desperate need to be liked disguised as intellectual superiority. Security! Colbert screamed, his voice echoing through the theater. Get him out of here! Two large men in suits began moving toward the stage, but Gosling held his ground. You know what the saddest part is, Stephen? You could have been something real. You had the platform, the intelligence, the audience. Instead, you chose to be a professional cynic who mistakes destruction for insight. You don't know anything about me, Colbert snarled, his face purple with rage. You don't know what I've sacrificed, what I've built, what I've accomplished. I know what you've become, Gosling replied, his voice suddenly calm again, which somehow made his words even more devastating. A man so afraid of being vulnerable that you've forgotten how to be human. At least when I play broken characters, I remember they can be fixed. The security guards reached the stage, but before they could escort him away, Gosling turned to address the stunned audience directly. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when entertainment becomes more important than truth, when performance becomes more valuable than authenticity. Don't you dare, Colbert warned, but his voice lacked its earlier venom. Something in Gosling's calm had unnerved him. You came here tonight expecting a show, Gosling continued, ignoring both Colbert and the approaching security. And you got one, but not the one they scripted for you. You saw what happens when someone stops playing their assigned role and starts telling the truth. The truth? Colbert's laugh was hollow now. The truth is you're having a public meltdown because someone didn't kiss your artistic feet. Gosling turned back to face his host, and for a moment the anger was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like pity. The truth, Stephen, is that you're so committed to your character that you've lost yourself completely. And the saddest part is, I don't think you even know it. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Colbert opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came out. For the first time in years, Stephen Colbert was speechless. The security guards finally reached Gosling, but he raised his hands peacefully. I'm leaving, he said quietly. But not because you're throwing me out. I'm leaving because this conversation stopped being worth having the moment you decided to attack instead of listen. As the guards flanked him, Gosling looked one last time at Colbert, who stood behind his desk like a fortress, his chest heaving with barely controlled emotion. The silence that followed was deafening. Colbert stood frozen behind his desk, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him as Gosling prepared to leave. But the actor wasn't quite finished delivering his final verdict. You know what's really tragic here, Stephen? Gosling said, pausing at the edge of the stage as the security guards waited for his compliance. This whole exchange proves exactly what's wrong with the culture you've helped create. Instead of engaging with ideas, you mock them. Instead of exploring complexity, you reduce everything to punchlines. Colbert found his voice again, but it came out strained and desperate. Don't you dare turn this around on me. You came on my show and disrespected everything I've built. Everything you've built? Gosling's laugh was soft but cutting. What have you built, Stephen? A nightly ritual of superiority disguised as comedy? A platform where genuine emotion gets ridiculed and authentic expression gets dismissed as pretension? The audience remained paralyzed, caught between their loyalty to their beloved host and the uncomfortable truth of what they were witnessing. Some began to shift uncomfortably in their seats, wondering if they should be laughing, if this was all somehow part of the show. "I've built a career on honesty," Colbert shot back, but his voice lacked conviction now. "I call out BS wherever I see it, and that includes overhyped actors who think they're changing the world with their little art films." "Honesty?" Gosling shook his head slowly. "Stephen, you wouldn't recognize honesty if it slapped you in the face. And it just did. What you call honesty is just cruelty with better marketing. What you call insight is just cynicism with a college vocabulary." Colbert's hands were shaking now. Whether from rage or something deeper, it was impossible to tell. "You don't get to come into my house and lecture me about who I am. You don't know me." "I know enough," Gosling replied, his voice growing quieter, more personal. "I know that somewhere along the way, you confused being clever with being wise. I know that you've spent so long performing intelligence that you've forgotten what actual wisdom looks like. And I know that right now, you're more concerned with winning this argument than understanding why it started." The words hit their target with surgical precision. Colbert's face went through a series of expressions, cycling between anger, confusion, and something that might have been recognition. "This is unbelievable," Colbert muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "I invite you here to promote your movie, and you turn it into some kind of therapy session about my character flaws." "I didn't turn it into anything," Gosling said firmly. "You did that the moment you decided that my work, my choices, my attempts to create something meaningful were fair game for your entertainment. You set the tone, Stephen. I just responded to it." The security guards looked uncertain now, glancing between their boss and the increasingly philosophical confrontation unfolding before them. This wasn't the usual celebrity meltdown they were trained to handle. Colbert ran his hands through his hair, his polished appearance finally showing cracks. "So what, I'm supposed to just nod and smile while you explain how your movie is going to save humanity? I'm supposed to pretend that every piece of art that walks through that door is sacred and beyond criticism? There's a difference between criticism and cruelty," Gosling said, stepping closer to the desk despite the security presence. "There's a difference between challenging ideas and attacking the person behind them. You crossed that line tonight, and you crossed it deliberately." "I do my job," Colbert said weakly. "I ask hard questions." "No," Gosling replied, his voice firm but not unkind. "You ask cruel questions designed to make yourself look clever at your guest's expense. That's not journalism, Stephen. That's not even good comedy. That's just bullying with better lighting." The accusation hung in the air. Like a verdict, Colbert looked around his theater, his kingdom, as if seeing it for the first time. The audience that usually hung on his every word sat silent and uncomfortable. His band looked away. Even his production crew seemed uncertain about what they were witnessing. "I'm not a bully," Colbert said, but the words came out hollow, unconvincing even to himself. "Then prove it," Gosling challenged. "Prove that you can have a conversation without needing to win it. Prove that you can engage with someone's work without destroying it. Prove that Stephen Colbert, the person, still exists somewhere underneath." Stephen Colbert, the character. For a moment something flickered in Colbert's eyes. Something vulnerable and real and almost hopeful. But then his defenses slammed back into place, his face hardening into the familiar mask of superiority. "Get him out of here," Colbert said to security, his voice cold and final. "Now." Gosling nodded slowly, as if he'd expected exactly this response. "And there it is," he said sadly. "When faced with the choice between growth and comfort, between honesty and performance, you choose the performance every time." As the security guards finally began to escort him away, Gosling turned one last time to the audience. "Don't let anyone convince you that cynicism is wisdom, that cruelty is honesty, or that tearing others down somehow builds you up. You deserve better entertainment than that. You deserve better conversations than that. You deserve better than that." And with those words, Ryan Gosling walked off the Late Show stage, leaving behind a stunned audience, a shaken host, and a moment of television that would be dissected and debated for years to come. Colbert stood alone behind his desk, the weight of silence pressing down on him like a physical force. For perhaps the first time in his career, he had nothing to say. So there you have it, the explosive confrontation that left one of Hollywood's biggest stars walking away from late-night television's biggest stage. What do you think really drove this incredible clash? Was Gosling out of line, or was he simply holding up a mirror that Colbert didn't want to look into? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit that subscribe button, and let me know what other untold Hollywood stories you want to hear. Because trust me, this is just the beginning.